The sun dipped low on the horizon as Mark, an ordinary geologist from Earth, prepared for his final mission on an unexplored planet in the distant reaches of the galaxy. It was supposed to be a routine survey, a simple check for minerals that could aid in humanity's expansion. Little did he know, this quiet, unassuming planet would change his life forever. Mark's ship landed softly on the barren ground, the surface covered with gray dust. He stepped out, breathing in the alien atmosphere, thin but breathable. The planet had been classified as uninhabitable by most, yet something drew Mark here. It was an odd, unexplained signal that had come through his ship's receiver, a message in an ancient alien language. The message was brief but repetitive, only 3 words: find the throne. Curiosity had taken the best of him, and against protocol, he followed the coordinates the signal led him to. As Mark made his way through the alien landscape, he marveled at the silence. Not a single sound, not even the wind, stirred the dust. His boots left deep imprints in the dust as he walked towards a looming structure in the distance, a large, broken-down pyramid with jagged edges, as if it had been abandoned for centuries. He approached the structure cautiously, his heart racing. It was clear this place had once been important, but now it stood in ruins. Mark found the entrance and stepped inside. The air grew cold and heavy as he walked through the dark, winding corridors. His flashlight flickered as if warning him to leave, but he pressed on. Finally, he entered a vast chamber. At the center of the room, there was a large stone throne, worn with time, but still imposing. Mark stood frozen in awe. It was a throne like no other, made of a black, reflective material, almost as if it was alive. He approached it slowly, drawn to it. His fingers brushed against the stone. The moment he touched it, something unexpected happened. The floor beneath him trembled, and the walls seemed to vibrate. A surge of energy rushed through him, filling him with a strange, foreign power. Suddenly, a voice echoed in the chamber, its tone both regal and commanding. "You have returned, my king." Mark stumbled back, his heart pounding. He turned around, searching the room. There was no one there. Was it a recording? A system designed to trigger upon contact with the throne. "You are mine. I have waited long enough," the voice continued. It was unmistakably feminine, powerful, yet full of yearning. Mark's mind raced. King. He was no king, just a simple human. He shook his head, trying to make sense of what was happening. But before he could react further, a strange shimmer filled the air before him, and a tall, magnificent woman appeared in front of him. She was unlike anything Mark had ever seen. Her skin shimmered like stardust, glowing with a faint ethereal light. Her hair cascaded like liquid silver, and her eyes, deep pools of ancient knowledge, locked onto his. "I am Queen Izora of the Rysar," she declared, her voice echoing with authority and grace. "And you are my lost king." Mark blinked in disbelief. This wasn't possible. He wasn't royalty, wasn't even close. "I think you've made a mistake," he said, his voice shaking. "No mistake," Queen Izora replied. "You are the one the prophecy spoke of. You are destined to rule beside me." Mark stood there, stunned. How could this alien woman believe such a thing? What did she mean by prophecy? And why was she calling him her king? Before he could ask more, she extended her hand, her eyes burning with urgency. "You must come with me. There is much to discuss, and we have little time." Mark stared at Queen Izora, trying to comprehend what had just happened. The words she spoke echoed in his mind. "You are my lost king." It felt like a dream. A strange, impossible dream. How could he, an ordinary human, be the king of an alien race? His heart raced, and his thoughts spun wildly. Yet there was something in her presence, something undeniably powerful, that made him want to listen. Izora's eyes remained fixed on him, her gaze unwavering. She was regal, every inch of her bearing exuded authority and grace. But there was something else in her eyes, something that spoke of centuries of waiting, of longing. "Come with me, my king," she said, extending her hand once more. Mark hesitated. He had no idea what this alien woman meant by her words, but her presence was magnetic. Despite his doubts, he took her hand. The moment his fingers touched hers, a strange surge of energy flowed through him, almost as if the throne in the chamber had passed a piece of its power into his very being. He shivered but didn't let go. Before he could say anything, the ground beneath their feet trembled again. The stone walls of the pyramid began to crack and shift. Azara's grip tightened, and with a single motion, she led him toward the far wall, where a hidden passage opened up. The passage was narrow, lit by a soft, blue light that glowed from the walls. "Where are we going?" Mark asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "To my ship," Azara answered, her voice calm, as though this was all part of a well-rehearsed plan. "The fate of my people depends on your decision." As they walked through the winding corridors, Mark couldn't help but wonder if this was all some kind of elaborate trap. How could she know he was some lost king? He was just a geologist, an explorer, nothing special. The idea seemed absurd, yet the strange energy still lingered in his veins, a constant reminder that something very real was happening. They reached a large open area, and Mark looked out in awe. A massive ship was parked just beyond the entrance. It was sleek and alien, unlike anything he had ever seen before. Its surface shimmered in the low light, its structure unlike any technology from Earth. The ship looked as though it was alive, its curves and edges forming a perfect harmony. It was beautiful, almost as if it had been crafted by some cosmic artist. Azara led him aboard with a steady, graceful stride. Once inside, Mark was taken aback by the advanced technology. Walls shifted as they moved, panels lit up at her touch, and the air itself hummed with energy. It was clear this ship was ancient, far older than any human technology, yet it seemed to have a life of its own. It felt like the ship and Azara were connected in some way. "Welcome aboard, my king," she said, her voice full of reverence. "This is the Rysar warship. It has waited for you, just as I have." Mark felt a mix of awe and confusion. "But why me? Why do you think I'm the king you're looking for?" Azara turned to face him, her expression softening. "You have been chosen, Mark. The prophecy speaks of a human who would return to save us. You are that human. Without you, my people will fall. The ancient enemies of the Rysar are close, and they seek to destroy us." Her word hung in the air, heavy with the weight of truth. The stakes were higher than Mark could have ever imagined. The Rysar, a civilization far older than anything on Earth, was in danger, and somehow he was the key to their survival. Mark took a deep breath, trying to steady his racing mind. "What do I need to do?" Queen Azara's eyes shone with determination. "Marry me, and together we will lead my people back to glory." Mark's heart skipped a beat. The idea of marriage, especially to someone like her, was overwhelming. But deep inside, a part of him knew there was no turning back. The fate of an entire world rested on his decision. Mark sat in a sleek, dark chair aboard the Rysar warship, staring out at the vastness of space. His thoughts were racing, still trying to make sense of everything that had happened. The idea that he, an ordinary human, was somehow tied to the fate of an alien empire was nearly impossible to grasp. Yet, the reality of the situation was undeniable. He could feel it in the way the ship hummed beneath him, in the way Azara's presence filled the room like a force of nature. Queen Azara stood by a large window, gazing out into the stars, her back straight and regal. The long silver strands of her hair cascaded down her shoulders, glowing faintly in the dim light. She had told him everything, the prophecy, the dangers her people faced, and how their world was on the brink of collapse without his help. But even with all the information, Mark still couldn't shake the doubt gnawing at him. He was just one man. What could he possibly do to save an entire civilization? Azara turned to him, sensing his unease. "You don't believe me, do you?" she asked, her voice calm but heavy with understanding. Mark shifted in his seat. "It's not that I don't believe you," he said. "It's just, this is all so sudden. I'm not a king. I'm not even a leader. I'm just a guy who was on a mission, and now I'm supposed to marry you to save your world." Isara's gaze softened. "You are more than you know, Mark. The prophecy doesn't lie. You are the one who will help us. You will guide us, and together, we will restore the Rysar to its rightful place." Before Mark could respond, a sharp alarm blared throughout the ship. The room around them shifted, the walls vibrating as a deep hum filled the air. Mark's heart skipped a beat. "What's happening?" he asked, standing up quickly. "We are not alone," Isara said, her voice tense. "Enemies are approaching." She walked to a nearby console, her fingers dancing across the controls with precision. The ship's view screen came to life, displaying a fleet of massive warships on the horizon, their dark silhouettes looming ominously. Mark's eyes widened as he took in the sight. These ships weren't like anything he had ever seen before. Massive, sleek, and clearly built for war. "They are the Draj, the ancient enemies of the Rysar," Isara explained, her voice cold. "They have come to destroy us, and they will stop at nothing to do so." Mark's mind raced. "What can we do? We can't take on a fleet like that." Isara's eyes met his. "We don't need to fight them. Not yet." Mark frowned. "What do you mean?" "The Draj want one thing, to tear us apart from within," she explained. "They are manipulating the nobles in my court. They are feeding lies, stirring unrest. If we are to survive, we must unite my people first. We must become the symbol of that unity. But not everyone will accept this." Mark's stomach tightened. "So, you think there are people in your own court who want to stop us?" Isara nodded. "Yes. There are those who believe that marrying a human, someone from another world, will weaken us. They do not understand the power of the prophecy, nor the strength of our bond." Mark's heart sank. He had hoped this would be a simple mission, but now it seemed the real battle was just beginning. Not only did he have to face an alien enemy, but there were traitors among the Queen's own people. Isara's expression hardened. "We will need to stand strong, together. We will face resistance, but I have no doubt that you are the one who can help me lead us to victory." Mark looked at her, his resolve hardening. Despite his doubts, he knew there was no turning back. The universe was at war, and somehow he was caught in the middle. But as he met the Queen's gaze, something inside him stirred. A determination, a fire that he hadn't known he had. "I'll stand by you, Isara," Mark said, his voice steady. "Let's show them what we're made of." Isara smiled, a small, proud smile that filled Mark with more confidence than he expected. "Then let us begin." Mark followed Queen Isara down the narrow, glowing corridors of the Rysar warship, his thoughts still reeling from the revelation of their enemies. The Draj. The ship hummed around him, a living, breathing thing. It was clear that this was no ordinary vessel. Every surface seemed to pulse with energy, and the very air seemed charged with something more than just technology. It felt like magic, like the ship itself was alive and responding to its occupants. Isara moved gracefully ahead of him, her presence like a force that drew everything around her into focus. Soon, they arrived at a large, circular room with walls that shimmered with ancient symbols. At the center was a huge viewport, offering a breathtaking view of the planet that had once been home to her people. Rysar was a world of vast oceans and lush forests, its cities sprawling in harmony with nature. But now, the land below was scared, torn apart by years of war and the shadow of the Draj. Mark stared out the window, feeling a sense of sadness wash over him. The planet had once been beautiful, a thriving world. But now it was dying. The lush forests were turning brown, the oceans were polluted, and the cities were in ruins. He could feel the weight of Isara's words in his chest. Their world was on the brink of collapse. "This is my world," Isara said softly, her voice full of sorrow. "It has been my duty to protect it, but we are losing everything. The Draj have sown chaos in every corner of our society. The nobles are divided, the people are afraid, and the land itself is dying. Mark turned to her, a mixture of awe and concern in his eyes. He had never imagined that the stakes were so high. He was just a geologist, a simple human, yet here he was, standing on the edge of a world's survival. "You said the prophecy spoke of a king," Mark said, his voice low. "What exactly does it say? What is it that makes me your king?" Isara met his gaze, her eyes intense and full of ancient knowledge. "The prophecy speaks of a ruler from beyond the stars, a savior who will unite the Rysar and lead us into a new age of peace and prosperity. It says that this ruler will come not from our bloodline, but from a world unknown to us, and that ruler will be bonded to the queen, restoring balance and saving our people." Mark shook his head. "But how could I be the one? I'm just a man. What do I have to offer that would make me the leader of an entire race?" "You have more than you know," Isara said, her voice calm but firm. "Your world, Earth, is filled with qualities we have long lost: resilience, unity, and a fierce will to survive. You have an energy that we have not seen in centuries. That is why you are the one chosen. You are not just a symbol of hope for the Rysar. You are the key to unlocking the strength within us." Mark felt a wave of uncertainty wash over him. How could he possibly live up to these expectations? He wasn't prepared for this. He wasn't ready to be a king, to marry an alien queen, to lead an entire civilization. But as he looked back at Isara, standing tall and regal despite the pain in her eyes, he knew he couldn't back down. She was right. This was bigger than anything he had ever imagined. He nodded slowly, his resolve strengthening. "What do we do now?" Isara's expression softened, but her eyes remained sharp with purpose. "Now we return to the heart of Rysar. The court awaits us, and we must face the resistance head-on. There are those who will fight us every step of the way. But if we stand together, nothing will tear us apart." Mark met her gaze, a quiet determination building inside him. "Then we'll face them together." The room seemed to grow quieter, as if the very ship was listening to their words. Isara smiled, a rare, genuine smile that made Mark's heart race. "Together," she echoed. Mark stood before the grand throne room of the Rysar Palace, the towering doors slowly creaking open to reveal the opulent interior. The walls were adorned with glowing symbols, and the floor was made of smooth, dark stone, reflecting the flickering light of the distant stars. It was a sight that took his breath away. This world, this palace, everything about it was far beyond anything he had ever imagined. And yet, despite all its beauty and grandeur, it felt empty. Isara stood beside him, her regal presence filling the room like a beacon. Her eyes were focused, her expression a mix of determination and quiet sorrow. She had brought him here for one reason: to introduce him to her court, to show them that he, the human from Earth, was the one they had been waiting for. But deep inside, Mark knew it wouldn't be easy. He wasn't just a man from another world. He was an outsider, a symbol of everything the traditionalists feared. As they walked toward the throne, Mark could feel the eyes of the court upon him. Dozens of alien nobles, all wearing elaborate robes and jeweled crowns, watched him closely. Their expressions ranged from curiosity to open hostility. Some whispered among themselves, while others glared with obvious disdain. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Mark's heart raced, and his palms began to sweat. Isara's voice rang out, cutting through the murmurs. "This is Mark, the one foretold in the prophecy. He is my king, and together, we will lead the Rysar into a new era." The room fell silent. Mark could feel the weight of their gazes, judging him, measuring him. He stood taller, forcing himself to meet their eyes, though doubt gnawed at his insides. He wasn't royalty, wasn't even close to what they expected. Yet he could feel the Queen's trust in him, a trust that was stronger than any doubts he had. He had to prove himself, not just to her, but to these people, her people. One of the nobles, an older alien with piercing eyes and a regal bearing, stepped forward. His robes shimmered with golden threads, and his voice was like a sharp blade. "You expect us to accept this human as our king?" he said, his tone dripping with skepticism. "How can we trust a foreigner to lead us? He is nothing more than an outsider." The court murmured in agreement. Mark felt the weight of their words pressing down on him, but he couldn't back down now. He turned to Azara, who stood beside him, her posture as strong as ever. She gave him a slight nod, a silent reassurance. "I may not be a king in your eyes," Mark began, his voice steady but full of determination. "But I am here because I believe in this world, in its people, and I believe in the Queen. She has given me a chance, and I will fight to prove that I am worthy of standing beside her." For a moment, there was silence. The court was watching him, waiting for him to falter, to show any weakness. But Mark held his ground, his chest rising and falling with each breath. He could feel the power of the throne room, the weight of history, and the eyes of 1,000 years of tradition watching him. Finally, Izara spoke, her voice cutting through the silence. "This is why I chose him," she said, her gaze unwavering. "He may not look like a king, but he has something none of you have, a strength that will unite us. He is my choice, and he will be our leader. Together, we will save Rysar." There was a pause, a moment of uncertainty hanging in the air. And then, slowly, one by one, the nobles began to nod, some reluctantly, some with respect. The tension in the room eased, if only slightly. Mark exhaled, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. It wasn't a victory yet, but it was a step forward. He was starting to see that perhaps, just perhaps, he did have what it took to lead. Izara turned to him with a smile, a look of pride in her eyes. "This is only the beginning, Mark. The road ahead will not be easy. But together, we can face it." Mark nodded, a quiet determination building inside him. He wasn't sure he was ready for everything ahead, but he knew one thing for certain. He wasn't backing down. Not now. Not ever. The days that followed the meeting with the Rysar court were tense. Mark had hoped that the acceptance of his role as king would ease the path ahead, but as the days passed, it became clear that not everyone was on board with the idea of a human ruling beside their queen. Even as the warship cut through space toward their capital, the whispers and glances from the Rysar nobles had only grown more intense. The people of the court did not trust him. They did not understand why their queen had chosen him, a foreigner, as their ruler. Mark couldn't help but feel the weight of their suspicion pressing down on him every time he walked through the halls. He had tried his best to hold his ground, to prove that he could be a leader, but their cold eyes made it clear that they still saw him as an outsider. One afternoon, as he walked with Izara through the grand hallways of the palace, a figure stepped forward to block their path. It was Lord Varnak, an influential member of the royal court, known for his sharp tongue and deep distrust of Mark. "Queen Izara," Varnak began, his voice dripping with thinly veiled contempt, "it is still beyond reason that you would place your faith in a human. The Rysar have fought too long and too hard to be ruled by someone who does not even belong to our galaxy." Mark stepped forward, meeting Varnak's icy stare. His patience was wearing thin, but he knew he couldn't let his temper get the best of him now. He was still fighting for their respect, and he couldn't afford to look weak. "I didn't choose to be here," Mark said firmly. "I was brought here because I believe in your queen, in the future of your people. If you can't see that, then I'm sorry." Isara's hand rested on Mark's arm, her voice cutting through the tension. "Enough, Lord Varnak," she said, her tone regal but firm. "I have made my choice, and it is not for you to question. Mark will be by my side, whether you accept it or not." Lord Varnak's face twisted with anger, but he held his tongue, bowing slightly before stepping aside. "The day will come when you see the truth, Queen Izara," he muttered under his breath as he walked away. Mark watched him go, sensing the danger that still lurked beneath the surface of their fragile alliance. "Don't let him get to you," Izara said softly, looking up at Mark with a mixture of concern and admiration. "There are others like him, but we will face them together." Mark nodded but couldn't shake the feeling that Lord Varnek's words had struck a chord. It wasn't just Varnek. He could see the disdain in the eyes of many in the court. And then, of course, there were the nobles who had supported him in the beginning, but they had done so more out of fear of losing their own influence than genuine belief in him. As they walked toward the council chamber, Mark's mind kept returning to the idea that perhaps Varnek wasn't wrong. He didn't belong here. He was a stranger in a foreign land. But Izara believed in him. That was the only thing that mattered right now. When they entered the council chamber, Mark could feel the cold eyes of the other nobles watching them. The room fell silent as the two of them took their seats at the head of the table. "We must discuss our next steps," Izara began, her voice calm but strong. "The Draj are coming. They will not wait forever. It is time we unite, or our world will fall." There was a murmur around the table. Some nodded in agreement, others remained silent, but Mark knew that the tension was far from over. They were not just facing an external enemy. The true battle was here, inside their own court. Mark clenched his fists, making a silent vow to himself. No matter what happened, he would not let Izara's world fall. He had come too far to turn back now. The days were growing more tense as the threats from the Draj loomed ever closer. The Rysars, once proud warriors, divided by years of civil conflict and political intrigue, were now faced with an even greater challenge. The Draj had always been their enemies, a ruthless alien race determined to destroy the Rysar and claim their world as their own. But now, Mark and Queen Izara were dealing with something more dangerous than the Draj, the discontent brewing within their own ranks. It was not just Lord Varnek anymore. Other nobles had begun to challenge Mark's presence, questioning why a human, an outsider, should rule alongside their queen. The whispers of rebellion were growing louder, and Izara had made it clear that the only way for them to survive was for Mark to prove his worth to the Rysar. One evening, Izara called Mark to the palace's central courtyard, where towering statues of ancient Rysar kings and queens stood in silent watch over the land. The sky above was streaked with the colors of twilight, a blend of violet and gold, casting long shadows over the stone floors. "We must show them who you truly are," Izara said, her voice steady but filled with determination. "If we are to unite my people, you must prove you have the strength and courage to lead. The trial of leadership is the only way to do that." Mark frowned, his mind racing. He had heard whispers of this trial, but had not understood its significance. It was an ancient rite, a test of physical, mental, and emotional strength that had been carried out for centuries. It was meant to prove a ruler's worth, not only to the people but also to the very planet itself. The challenge would be tough, perhaps even deadly, but there was no other way to gain the respect of the court. "What exactly does this trial involve?" Mark asked, his voice tense with both excitement and fear. Izara's eyes locked onto his with a hint of pride. "You will face a series of tests designed to challenge every aspect of your being. You will have to fight, think, and lead. You will not face this alone, but your actions will determine how the rest of the Rysars see you. There will be obstacles, some of them created by those who doubt you." The words struck him with the force of a blow. He knew the stakes had been high, but now they were personal. If he failed, he wouldn't just lose the respect of the Rysar. Their world would crumble, and Izara's reign would be at risk. Mark clenched his fists, trying to push down the nerves that had settled in his stomach. "I'm ready," he said, though his voice sounded less certain than he wanted it to. Izara smiled at him, a soft but knowing look in her eyes. "I know you are. You have a fire in you, Mark. That is what we need." The trial began the next day at dawn, in the heart of the Rysar's ancient training grounds. Rysar warriors, some of the finest fighters in the galaxy, lined the arena, watching silently as Mark stepped into the center. The ground beneath him was hard, the air thick with tension. He could hear the faint murmurs of the nobles watching from the sidelines, but his focus was on the task ahead. The first test was a physical challenge, a series of combat trials. Mark was handed a sword, its weight unfamiliar in his hands. But he had trained for moments like this. He had fought before, but this was different. He wasn't just defending himself. He was fighting for the future of a world. His opponent, a tall, broad-shouldered warrior, stepped forward, his eyes full of disdain. Mark's heart pounded as they faced off. The warrior lunged first, swinging his blade with deadly intent. Mark dodged, feeling the air rush past him as the sword cut through the space where his neck had been moments before. He wasn't just fighting to survive. He was fighting to prove something. The battle was intense, but Mark's instincts kicked in. He had never been trained as a warrior, but the fire within him burned bright. He used his speed, agility, and sheer determination to stay one step ahead, blocking blows and delivering his own strikes when the time was right. Finally, with a swift move, Mark knocked the warrior's sword from his hands, standing tall and steady as the crowd watched in silence. The warrior knelt, acknowledging Mark's victory. The first test was complete, but it was only the beginning. As Sarah stood on the sidelines, watching him closely, her face a mixture of pride and concern. Mark had won the first battle, but there were many more to come. The trials were far from over. The trial was far from over, and Mark had barely caught his breath after the first victory. His muscles ached from the fierce battle, but his mind was sharp. The Raisar warriors were unlike anything he had ever faced on Earth, fast, skilled, and deadly. But this was not just a test of strength, it was a test of everything. If he could prove himself here, he might finally earn the respect he needed to stand beside Queen Azara as her true king. The second challenge came quickly as the sun began to set, casting an orange glow over the arena. This time, Mark was not facing another warrior, but a complex puzzle, one that required both wit and strategy. Before him, a large structure rose from the ground. An ancient machine, long abandoned, with strange alien symbols glowing faintly along its surface. It was clear that this was no ordinary test. This was designed to challenge his mind, his ability to think under pressure. Solve the riddle of the machine, and you will pass the test. Izara's voice echoed from the stands, her eyes fixed on him. The rest of the court watched closely, waiting for Mark to make his move. Mark walked forward, examining the machine closely. The symbols on its surface shifted and changed, creating patterns that seemed impossible to understand. The puzzle was not just a set of moving parts. It was alive, reacting to his presence, testing him. For a moment, Mark felt overwhelmed. The complexity of the machine was like nothing he had ever seen. How was he supposed to figure this out? But then he remembered why he was here. He wasn't just solving a puzzle. He was fighting for a future, for the Raisar and their people. With that thought in mind, he took a deep breath and focused on the symbols. Mark reached out, touching one of the glowing symbols. The machine hummed, and a section of the floor beneath him shifted, revealing a hidden compartment with a series of buttons. The puzzle had begun. He realized it was not just about following the patterns. It was about understanding the flow, the way the machine responded to each move. One by one, Mark pressed the buttons, matching the symbols in the correct order. His heart raced with every step, but his hands were steady. He felt a connection to the machine, a strange but real sense that he was learning its language. The puzzle's complexity began to fade as the symbols became clearer, the machine's rhythm guiding him forward. Finally, with a last press of a button, the machine let out a low hum. The structure began to shift, and the machine's parts clicked into place, releasing a burst of light that filled the arena. Mark had done it. The court erupted in applause, but Mark didn't let himself bask in the glory. He had only passed one test. There was still more to come. Izara's face was unreadable, but Mark could see the pride in her eyes. She stepped forward, her voice carrying over the crowd. "You have done well, Mark," she said, her voice steady. "But this trial is far from over. The final test is the hardest, and it will be the one that determines whether you are truly worthy of the throne. Mark's stomach tightened. He had passed the first 2 tests, but the final one was the one that really mattered. This was the test that would either confirm him as the true ruler of the Rysar, or shatter his dreams of ruling alongside Azara. Azara's eyes locked onto his, and for the first time, Mark saw a flicker of doubt in her expression. "Are you ready?" she asked softly. Mark nodded, feeling a weight heavier than any battle he had fought. "I'm ready." And so, the final trial began. The final trial had begun. Mark stood at the edge of the Rysar's grand arena, his heart pounding in his chest. The stakes were higher than ever. His success in the first 2 trials had gained him some respect, but the final test would be different. It wasn't just about proving his strength or solving a puzzle. This trial would determine his true place in the Rysar world. The arena was silent as Mark faced the test of trust, a trial that would test his ability to lead, not with power or strength, but through the support of those around him. To pass, he would have to rally the Rysar nobles and prove that they could trust him as their ruler. Mark felt a wave of anxiety wash over him. After everything he had been through, this was the most important moment. But as he walked to the center of the arena, he realized that something was terribly wrong. He had been warned. Lord Varnak and other nobles had spoken in whispers, casting doubts on his ability to rule. But now it felt like something more. Mark's instincts told him that there was a plot against him, something more than just words and distrust. The question was, who could he trust? Just as he prepared to step forward, he was interrupted by a loud voice from the back of the arena. The crowd parted, and a figure stepped into the light. It was Lord Varnak, but this time he wasn't alone. Behind him, a group of powerful nobles followed, their faces cold and determined. Mark's heart sank. He knew immediately that this was not just a challenge, it was a betrayal. "You are not our king," Varnak's voice boomed across the arena. "You, a mere human, have no place leading the Rysar." The crowd gasped. Mark turned to Azara, who stood frozen beside him. Her expression was unreadable, but Mark could feel her anger and confusion radiating from her. "What are you doing, Varnak?" Azara demanded, her voice strong but tinged with disbelief. Varnak sneered. "You've made a mistake, Queen Azara. The Rysar cannot be ruled by a foreigner. We will not stand for it." Mark stepped forward, his voice steady despite the shock and betrayal flooding through him. "So this was your plan all along? To betray us?" Varnak didn't answer, but his cold smile said enough. He turned to the other nobles, who stood silent, their loyalties divided. Some looked at Mark with disdain, while others looked uncertain, torn between their loyalty to Azara and their fear of the unknown. "You cannot lead us, human," Varnak continued. "We will not bow to someone who is not one of us." A tense silence hung in the air. Mark felt his throat tighten. This wasn't just about winning the trials anymore. This was about his survival, about whether he would stand by Azara's side, or whether the betrayal would tear everything apart. Azara's eyes flashed with anger, but she took a step back, her voice calm as she spoke. "This is the final trial, Mark. It is not just about winning the trust of the nobles. It is about standing up against those who would tear us apart. They may try to betray us, but we will not let them." Mark nodded, understanding the weight of her words. He had to prove that he was more than just a symbol. He had to be a leader. He had to unite the Rysar, even if it meant standing alone against those who would challenge him. Without hesitation, Mark raised his voice, addressing the crowd. "I may not be Rysar, but I stand for unity. If you think you can divide us, you are wrong. I fight for Azara, for this world, and for all of you." The room was silent for a moment, but then, slowly, a few of the nobles began to speak out in support of Mark and Azara. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Varnak's face twisted with anger as he realized the tide was beginning to turn. Mark looked at Azara, who gave him a slight nod. He knew this was only the beginning, but for the first time, He felt like he had truly earned his place beside her. The battle wasn't over yet, but the trust between them and the Rysar people was beginning to grow. The tension in the Grand Hall was almost unbearable as the court waited for the final decision. Mark stood beside Queen Izara, both of them facing a divided room filled with Rysar nobles and powerful figures who had once opposed their union. The air was thick with the weight of their judgment. Lord Varnek's betrayal had almost torn them apart, but somehow they had made it through. Now, it was time for Mark to prove once and for all that he was not just a symbol, but a true ruler worthy of standing by Izara's side. Their final test was not a battle or a puzzle. It was a matter of trust, of unity, and of leadership. As the last murmurs of conversation died down, Izara stepped forward, her eyes scanning the room with quiet authority. She looked back at Mark, a silent promise passing between them. This was it, the moment that would change everything. "I have chosen my king," Izara said, her voice strong and unwavering. "Not because of a prophecy or because of his bloodline, but because he has proven himself in ways no one else has. He has shown courage, strength, and wisdom in the face of impossible odds." Mark's heart raced, but he stood tall. This was what he had been fighting for. Not just the throne, but the future of the Rysar and the love he had come to share with Izara. But even now, the room was not entirely silent. A few dissenting voices spoke out, questioning his ability to rule. One noble, a tall figure with a deep voice, spoke from the back. "Do you truly believe that a human, an outsider, can rule us? That he can lead our people to greatness?" The voice was cold, filled with disdain. Mark turned to face the speaker, his eyes steady. He wasn't the same man who had stepped into the arena months ago, unsure of his place in this world. He was a man who had faced trial after trial, and each one had taught him something about leadership, about sacrifice, and about what it meant to stand for something bigger than himself. "I don't claim to know all the answers," Mark began, his voice firm. "But I do know this. Izara's world is worth fighting for. Your world is worth fighting for. I may not be Rysar, but I've learned more from you in these last few weeks than I ever thought possible. I've seen your courage, your strength, and your desire to protect this planet. I am here because I believe in you, in all of you." He paused, looking at Izara, "And I believe in her." The words hung in the air. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, slowly, a few of the nobles began to nod, their expressions softening. Mark could see that they were beginning to understand. He wasn't trying to replace them or undermine their history. He was simply offering a different path, one where they could all unite to protect what mattered most. Lord Varnek, standing at the back of the room, narrowed his eyes, still not convinced. But even he could see that the mood in the room was shifting. His allies were beginning to waver, and the uncertainty in the air was palpable. Izara stepped forward, her voice clear and commanding. "We have come too far to turn back now. Together, we can restore the Rysar to its former glory. Together, we will face the Drash, and together, we will ensure the survival of our people." A murmur of agreement rippled through the room, growing louder with each passing second. Finally, Varnek's voice broke the silence, this time softer, more resigned. "You have my support, Queen Izara," he said, bowing his head. "And yours, human." The room erupted in applause, and for the first time, Mark felt the weight of the Rysar world shift in his favor. He wasn't just an outsider anymore. He had earned his place beside Izara, not through force or birthright, but through his actions, his commitment to their future. Mark turned to Izara, her face glowing with pride. "We did it," he whispered. "Yes," she replied, her voice soft. "Together." And as the court celebrated their union, the stars outside twinkled, a symbol of the new path they had forged. It was just the beginning. There would be challenges ahead, enemies to face, and many battles to fight. But for the first time, Mark felt like he wasn't alone. He had found his place, not just in Izara's world, but in her heart as well. Together, they would lead the Rysar into a new age, an age of peace, unity, and hope.